Nestled in the western Pennsylvania countryside lies a collection of church relics that defy all historical tracing. Small bone fragments and preserved flesh rest within ornate reliquaries across 17 different congregations, from Philadelphia to the frontier settlements, their origins lost to both time and intentional deceit. From 1745 to 1792, more than 73 individuals vanished from these communities, devout men, women, and, most hauntingly, orphan children, each later declared a saint by local religious leaders. Few are aware that a sealed record in the Philadelphia Historical Society holds the testimonies of 3 witnesses who uncovered the horrifying reality. The Whitmore family workshop, where human bodies were processed into holy relics for almost 50 years. This manuscript has remained sealed for centuries at the request of the churches involved. Yet through diligent research, I have unearthed the terrifying truth that the religious establishment has fought desperately to conceal. Before we delve further into the gruesome enterprise of the Whitmore family, hit subscribe if you possess the courage to hear historical horrors that most channels dare not reveal. Let me know in the comments which state you're listening from. It's possible your own local church safeguards secrets beyond imagination. Now, let's explore further this disturbing chapter of American religious history. The true horror of the Pennsylvania woods extends far beyond what historians typically acknowledge, touching communities whose descendants still worship in those very churches today. In the mid-18th century, the colony of Pennsylvania stood as a unique haven of faith. While Quakers dominated Philadelphia and nearby counties with their plain meeting houses and emphasis on inner light, the Western territories blended Protestant denominations, Presbyterian, Lutheran, and smaller Christian sects, each building modest wooden churches as they pressed further into lands taken from native peoples. Arriving from England in 1742, the Whitmore family settled in Chester County, about 30 miles west of Philadelphia, where rolling hills yielded to dense forests and scattered farmsteads. Nathaniel Whitmore presented himself as a craftsman of religious items, chalices, communion plates, and ornate Bible covers that quickly won favor among wealthier congregations. His workshop, a 2-story timber structure on 12 wooded acres, featured large windows flooding the main floor with light. There, he would receive ministers and elders commissioning his increasingly sought-after work. His wife, Elizabeth, managed their household and 4 children with a precision neighbors found admirable, if strangely cold. The Whitmores attended Sunday services at the Harmony Meeting House, a modest Quaker gathering, where they sat quietly, occasionally offering measured testimonies that impressed others with their apparent depth. Their eldest son, Thomas, assisted in the workshop, while daughters Mary and Sarah helped with household duties. The youngest, William, a frail boy with an intense gaze, often spent hours alone in the woods, returning with plants and small animal specimens he meticulously preserved, a hobby his parents encouraged as scientific pursuit. Chester County faced the typical hardships of colonial life, harsh winters, crop failures, and the constant tension of the frontier. Yet it was also a time of religious fervor and growth. The Great Awakening had swept through the colonies, leaving heightened spiritual awareness and competition between denominations for souls and status. Churches sought to distinguish themselves through doctrine as well as the quality of their buildings and artifacts. Perfectly positioned to serve this market, Nathaniel's craftsmanship soon elevated him above local competitors. By 1745, his workshop had expanded to include 2 apprentices, Jacob Miller, an orphan son of German immigrants, and Peter Collins, a quiet young man from a poor Philadelphia family. The family lived comfortably, gaining a reputation for industriousness and piety, an effective mask for what transpired behind the workshop's closed doors after sunset. In the late autumn of 1745, Mary Collins, a devout Quaker woman known for healing work among the poor, disappeared while traveling home from visiting a sick family. Her disappearance caused brief concern before being attributed, as was common, to an Indian attack or wild animal encounter. Unbeknownst to all, Mary Collins marked the beginning of a horrifying enterprise that would continue undetected for nearly half a century. On November 17, 1745, as an early winter storm descended upon Chester County, Mary Collins made her final journey along the rutted path past the Whitmore property. The sky darkened prematurely, heavy clouds promising snow as wind drove brittle leaves across frozen ground. Mary, a widow of 43 with gray-streaked hair and hands weathered from charity, pulled her woolen cloak tighter, quickening her pace as she passed the lantern light glowing from the Whitmore workshop. According to Thomas Whitmore's deathbed confession, found years later hidden in a Philadelphia prison cell, his father had watched Mary for weeks. Father said her reputation for saintliness would make her perfect, Thomas wrote in shaky script. He told us God had revealed a great purpose, a way to bring true holiness to the colonies through sacred vessels. As Mary passed, Nathaniel emerged from the trees, lantern in hand, calling for help with practiced desperation. He claimed his son William had wandered into the woods and not returned. Mary, ever kind, did not hesitate to assist despite the storm. She followed Nathaniel deeper onto the property, toward a small clearing where the workshop's rear entrance stood partially concealed by pines. I watched from the window as Father led her inside. Thomas's confession continued. Mother had prepared the back room with canvas cloths covering the floor. I didn't understand yet what they intended. I was 16 and believed when they spoke of creating sacred relics, they meant crafting representations, not the. Here the handwriting broke into illegible tremors. What occurred in that room remained mercifully vague in Thomas's account, but the aftermath was described with chilling precision. Mary Collins's body was methodically processed over 3 days. Nathaniel, having studied preservation techniques from English medical texts, taught his son how to treat human tissue with salt, herbs, and other substances to prevent decay. Elizabeth sewed small black velvet pouches, each embroidered with golden religious symbols. Father said we were doing God's work, Thomas wrote. He said the Protestant churches of America lacked the sacred relics that gave the Catholic Church its power, and that we would provide what was needed to elevate true worship. I believed him then. God forgive me, I believed him. 2 weeks after Mary Collins vanished, Nathaniel traveled to Philadelphia carrying several ornate wooden boxes of his own making. He returned with more commissions and a considerable sum. At the next Quaker meeting, he spoke movingly of our dear friend Mary and suggested a memorial service. During this service, he presented the meeting house with an exquisitely crafted altar box, made in Mary's honor. Unbeknownst to the congregation, sealed within a hidden compartment of that box was a small piece of Mary Collins herself, the first of hundreds of sacred relics to be distributed over the coming decades. Winter passed into spring, and with the thaw came rumors from Philadelphia, whispers of miraculous healings attributed to a holy relic held by a small Episcopal church. The rector claimed a fragment of bone from an unknown 18th-century saint had cured 3 parishioners. The bone, he said, came from a European dealer through a local craftsman. That craftsman was Nathaniel Whitmore. By 1750, the family's business had expanded considerably. Their workshop doubled in size, now employing 5 apprentices who crafted the public-facing products, ornate boxes, chalices, and religious items. None were permitted access to the cellar rooms beneath, where the true business occurred. The family also built a new home, a substantial stone and timber structure testament to their growing wealth. The disappearance of Mary Collins had faded from memory, replaced by occasional reports of other missing persons, typically individuals without strong family ties, whose absences were blamed on travel dangers or Indian troubles. What changed in this period was the Whitmore's method of selecting victims. Mother developed what she called the discernment, Sarah Whitmore wrote in a journal discovered in 1823. She could identify those whose bodies would produce the most powerful relics. She claimed God spoke to her, revealing which souls were destined for sainthood. This chilling rationalization allowed the family to view their actions not as murder, but as a divine calling, merely helping chosen individuals achieve their heavenly purpose sooner than nature intended. They also refined their distribution. Nathaniel established connections with church leaders throughout Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and as far as Virginia. Father told them the Catholic Church in Europe had hoarded sacred power for centuries, Thomas's confession explained. He convinced these Protestant ministers that acquiring relics quietly would bring the same power to their congregations without embracing Catholic doctrine. His arguments proved effective with ambitious clergy seeking to grow their flocks. The operation expanded to include a network of collaborators who would report on miracles occurring in churches with Whitmore relics. These accounts were then shared with potential buyers, driving demand and higher prices. Nathaniel instructed church leaders to keep the relic's existence secret from the general congregation, enhancing their perceived value as a sacred trust. None of their customers knew the ancient European saints' relics they purchased were created in the Whitmore cellar from the bodies of their own neighbors. In the spring of 1753, a Lancaster physician named Dr. Samuel Winters began asking uncomfortable questions after examining a healing relic. His inspection revealed the preserved tissue could not be as old as claimed. Before he could pursue his investigation, Dr. Winters disappeared while traveling between Lancaster and Philadelphia. His body was never found, but a small wooden case containing what was claimed to be a 12th-century healer's fingerbone appeared in a New York Presbyterian church the following month. Years passed, and the pattern continued. The Whitmore children grew into the family business with varying enthusiasm. Thomas became his father's primary assistant, while William developed a particular talent for preservation, experimenting with techniques for more convincing relics. The daughters, Mary and Sarah, managed finances and correspondence, maintaining the family's respectable facade while laundering profits through legitimate ventures. As the colonies moved toward revolution, trade disruption with England created a shortage of religious items, positioning their workshop as a reliable source. The family demonstrated appropriate patriotic sentiment without aligning too closely with either side, a neutrality that allowed their trade to continue regardless of who controlled the territory. As the Revolutionary War neared its end, a disturbing new chapter began, one that would lead to their downfall. The year was 1781. While the colonies celebrated impending independence, the Whitmores identified a new, particularly profitable market for their gruesome products. The war's end brought significant changes to the religious landscape of the new United States. Churches needed rebuilding, and a spiritual revival swept through communities. This environment created unprecedented demand for religious artifacts, and the Whitmores saw an opportunity to expand their macabre enterprise. In February 1782, the first orphan child disappeared from a church-run asylum in Philadelphia. 10-year-old Joseph Miller, placed there after his parents died of smallpox, was small, solemn, and unusually pious. His disappearance was noted, briefly investigated, and attributed to running away. 3 months later, the Church of St. Michael in eastern Pennsylvania reported miraculous events surrounding a newly acquired relic, supposedly the preserved heart of a child martyr from the early church. Parishioners claimed prayers before this relic brought extraordinary answers, especially concerning children's illnesses. Church attendance swelled, and donations increased dramatically. Word spread, creating demand among other churches for similar powerful relics. William suggested the children, Sarah Whitmore's journal revealed, the ink blotched as if by tears. He said their innocence made them more powerful vessels. Father hesitated at first, but the prophet potential convinced him. God help me, I knew it was wrong. Yet I said nothing. What followed was the most disturbing phase. Between 1782 and 1785, at least 16 children, orphans or from destitute families, vanished from communities within a day's ride of the Whitmore property. Each disappearance stirred briefly before being blamed on wilderness dangers, traffickers, or the harsh realities of frontier life. During this period, the market for child saint relics flourished. These items commanded prices 5 times higher than adult relics, justified by their supposed spiritual potency. The Whitmores grew wealthier than ever, investing in land, businesses, and political connections that insulated them from suspicion. But the increased scale required more hands, forcing the family to partially initiate 2 trusted apprentices into their secrets. One of these men, Daniel Foster, would become central to their undoing. In autumn 1785, Quaker minister Elijah Thompson was appointed to investigate irregular religious practices in outlying communities. A methodical man with a legal background, Thompson had a reputation for untangling complex church disputes. I was tasked with examining troubling reports of Catholic-like practices involving relics, Thompson wrote in his journal, now in the Historical Society's sealed collection. Such idolatry runs counter to our belief in direct communion with the divine. His investigation began in Philadelphia, where he noticed a curious pattern: many relics traced back to Nathaniel Whitmore or his associates. The provenance, while elaborate, lacked verifiable historical connections. In December 1785, Thompson traveled to Chester County to meet Nathaniel directly. Whitmore received me graciously, his journal describes. He showed me his public workroom, spoke at length about European suppliers, and provided impressive-looking documentation that contained inconsistencies my legal training could not overlook. Thompson left troubled but without concrete evidence. He continued interviewing church leaders and cataloging miracles. A disturbing pattern emerged: the most dramatic miracles often involved witnesses with some connection to the Whitmore network. I began to suspect a deliberate scheme to manufacture not only the relics, but the miracles attributed to them, Thompson wrote. As his investigation intensified, strange occurrences plagued him. Items went missing, correspondence failed to arrive, and evidence vanished from his locked trunk. In February 1786, Thompson returned to Philadelphia to present his findings. The night before his presentation, he attended a dinner and became violently ill. Physicians diagnosed poisoning, though the source was unknown. He survived but remained weakened for months, halting his investigation. During Thompson's convalescence, Daniel Foster, the apprentice burdened by conscience, fled the Whitmore compound after witnessing the processing of a child's body. He took a journal documenting dates, names, and details of the family's activities, and made his way to Philadelphia. After weeks of gathering courage, Foster approached Elijah Thompson. The young man shook violently as he spoke, Thompson recorded. Foster described a cellar chamber where bodies hung from hooks, tools for removing bone and organ, and preservation techniques involving salt, alcohol, and herbs. Most disturbing was his description of the family's demeanor: calm, methodical, reverent, as if performing sacred rites. Nathaniel and Elizabeth led prayers before and after, thanking God for choosing these vessels. Armed with Foster's testimony, Thompson prepared to act. But before he could present evidence, a fire destroyed his Philadelphia residence, claiming all of Foster's documentation. The apprentice vanished the next day. Partial remains identified by unique boot buckles were found in the Delaware River 3 weeks later. Undeterred, Thompson continued with greater caution: no written records, coded messages, multiple informants. By late 1786, he had connected at least 27 disappearances to the Whitmore operation and identified 9 churches housing human remains disguised as relics. What he still lacked was physical evidence to convince skeptical authorities. That opportunity came from an unexpected source: Sarah Whitmore herself. The winter of 1787 brought heavy snows, isolating the Whitmore compound. During this seclusion, fractures within the family deepened. Sarah, now 32 and unmarried, her father had discouraged suitors, began to crumble under the weight of her complicity. "I can no longer sleep without seeing their faces," she wrote in December 1787. "The children especially haunt me. William has become something inhuman. I cannot bear much more." Sarah's crisis coincided with an escalation in the family's activities. William, now 27, pushed for increased production, arguing the post-revolution spiritual hunger created a market to fully exploit. This required more victims, increasing risks. William proposed targeting remote frontier settlements where disappearances would attract less attention. Nathaniel, now ill, conceded leadership to his youngest son. In January 1788, 2 incidents set the family's exposure in motion. First, William returned from western Pennsylvania with 3 new subjects, all children from a settlement devastated by winter illness. Processing them quickly forced the family to store partially preserved remains longer than usual. Second, and more significant, Sarah made a fateful decision. During a rare solo trip to Philadelphia, she sought out Elijah Thompson. Their meeting, in the back room of a Quaker bookshop, lasted over 3 hours. Thompson's coded notes recorded Sarah's revelations. Female W provided confirmation of all suspicions and worse. Estimates 70+ adult victims, 20+ children since beginning. Underground chamber beneath main workshop contains remains. Ledger documents every acquisition and distribution. "I know I condemn myself," Sarah reportedly told Thompson. "But the children's faces give me no peace, and I cannot allow more innocents to feed my family's ungodly work." Thompson arranged for her to stay with trusted Quaker contacts rather than return. This decision accelerated the confrontation. When Sarah failed to return, William immediately suspected betrayal. The family held a tense council. William argued for violent action. Nathaniel, weakened, muttered prayers about betrayal. Elizabeth calmly listed vulnerabilities. They decided William would track Sarah, while Elizabeth would relocate incriminating materials to an abandoned mineshaft on the property. Unbeknownst to them, Thompson had already assembled a coalition of authorities. By February 12, 1788, a plan was in place to raid the compound. The night before the raid, a snowstorm descended. Thompson, fearing delay, proceeded with a smaller force, 6 armed men, including 2 constables and 4 Quaker volunteers. What followed was described as the night of unholy discovery. February 13 arrived with howling winds and driving snow. Thompson's party reached the Whitmore property after nightfall, approaching the workshop on foot. "We moved like ghosts through the storm," wrote James Pearson, a Quaker volunteer. The workshop windows glowed with lantern light despite the late hour. Thompson knocked, announcing official business. The door opened to reveal Thomas Whitmore, who showed no surprise. His manner suggested not the panic of discovery, but the composed resignation of a man who had prepared for this moment, Pearson recorded. Inside, the workshop appeared normal. Thomas answered questions monosyllabically, his eyes drifting toward a large cabinet. Constable William Bradford moved to it and found a black velvet pouch containing what appeared to be a preserved human finger. At this, Thomas sank to his knees, muttering prayers or confessions. He revealed his father was ill in the main house, while his mother and brother had departed hours earlier with large trunks. Thompson sent 2 men to intercept them, then pressed Thomas to reveal the underground chamber. After resistance, Thomas led them to a workbench that slid aside, exposing a trapdoor. "The smell that rose struck us like a physical blow," Pearson wrote. A miasma of chemical preservatives mixed with the unmistakable stench of human decay. Below, a series of earth-reinforced rooms unfolded. The first contained workbenches with surgical implements, notebooks of procedures, and anatomical drawings. The adjacent room held the true horror, 3 bodies, 2 adults, 1 child, suspended from hooks, partially dissected with surgical precision, tissue treated to a waxy appearance. The third chamber, the archive, held floor-to-ceiling shelves with hundreds of small wooden boxes, each labeled with names, dates, and locations. Each contained a preserved human fragment, a catalogue of all the saints created. At the center stood Elizabeth Whitmore's ledger, documenting in cold commercial terms the acquisition, processing, and distribution of relics. Thomas, now resigned, revealed the operation had processed 79 adults and 22 children since 1745, supplying over 40 churches across 7 states. When asked how they selected victims, his answer chilled investigators: Mother had the discernment. She could sense those whose bodies would produce the most powerful relics, the truly devout, the innocents. As dawn approached, commotion above drew them back. The 2 men sent after Elizabeth and William returned, one seriously injured, his companion dead. William fought like one possessed, the wounded men reported. We found them at the abandoned mine shaft. When confronted, Elizabeth offered money. William struck from behind. The Whitmores fled into the forest with what they could carry. A manhunt was organized at daylight. Nathaniel was found in the main house, too ill to resist. The search for Elizabeth and William continued for 3 days before their bodies were discovered in a hunting cabin 12 miles away. Arranged side by side on a crude altar, both had consumed poison after performing some form of ritual. Notes suggested they believed their deaths would consecrate the salvaged relics. Thomas was tried in Philadelphia in April 1788, proceedings kept secret due to the crime's disturbing nature. He was hanged on May 7, 1788, after providing a full confession. Authorities then faced the challenge of the hundreds of human remains distributed to unsuspecting churches. The decision, prioritizing preventing public panic over full disclosure, shaped how this chapter would be deliberately forgotten. We determined the faithful should be protected from knowledge that might devastate their spiritual foundations, wrote Judge William Bradford in a sealed memorandum. Therefore, all records shall be sealed for not less than 100 years, and officials involved are bound to silence by oath. Churches were privately informed and given options: have the remains collected for burial, or handle the matter with absolute discretion. According to Thompson's final report, most chose the latter. Disturbingly, historical records suggest at least 17 churches chose to retain the human remains, continuing to present them as authentic relics. Their justifications varied. Some believed God had sanctified the victims through their sacrifice, others cited practical benefits, donations, attendance, prestige. Thompson found this abhorrent. His final effort was a confidential registry of every identifiable Whitmore victim and their remains location, sealed with instructions for future memorialization. The Whitmore property was burned to the ground, officially an accident, though accounts suggest deliberate destruction. The land was reclaimed by the state and eventually sold to unknowing families. Sarah Whitmore, given a new identity, relocated to Boston under Quaker protection, where she lived until 1823. Her journal reveals a woman haunted by guilt, dedicating her life to charity, particularly for orphan children. I have lived 40 years attempting to balance scales that can never be truly balanced, she wrote in her final entry. I go to my judgment with no expectation of mercy. Physical evidence of the crimes was supposedly destroyed, but rumors persisted that certain items were preserved by medical schools or private collectors fascinated by the tissue preservation techniques, methods William had developed through gruesome experimentation. The story might have remained buried were it not for a courthouse fire in Philadelphia in 1879. Water damage documents from the 1788 case were mistakenly included with regular records. A clerk discovered portions of Thomas Whitmore's confession, sparking rumors that reached a reporter. The resulting sensationalized article, published on November 17, 1879, exactly 134 years after Mary Collins's death, was soon denounced as fiction and retracted under pressure. By then, most churches had either disposed of the relics or incorporated them so fully their origins were forgotten. In 1923, renovations to the Pennsylvania Historical Society building revealed a hidden compartment containing the complete sealed records, apparently placed there by Elijah Thompson. Catalogued under an innocuous title and restricted, they allowed historians to piece together the full scope. A discreet 1967 survey identified 11 churches still possessing objects matching the Whitmore ledger descriptions, though most leaders were unaware of their origins. Reactions to evidence ranged from cooperation to denial. The last verified Whitmore relic was removed from a western Pennsylvania Lutheran church in 2005. Renovations exposed a hidden compartment with a velvet pouch and a 1788 letter. DNA testing confirmed human tissue. The remains were given a proper burial under a marker reading, "Unknown Child of God, finally at rest. The former Whitmore land changed hands many times. The workshop site remained undeveloped, owners reported crops failed and livestock refused to graze there. Local legend says on certain autumn nights, particularly around November 17th, the outline of the workshop glows faintly in the darkness. If this tale of exploitation and murder has chilled you, share it with another who appreciates historical horror. Hit like to support our exploration of America's hidden terrors, and subscribe so you never miss our journeys into the shadows of the past. What secrets might your community's history hold? The most enduring legacy of the Whitmore case may be the questions it forces us to ask about historical narratives. The deliberate suppression of this story shows how uncomfortable truths are erased when they threaten institutions or beliefs. History often represents not the complete past, but the version powerful interests allowed to survive. For the victims, especially the children, perhaps the greatest injustice is their erasure. They died twice, first at their killers' hands, then when their identities were obscured to protect reputations. As we conclude, remember that unmarked graves in eastern Pennsylvania hold partial remains of those made unwilling saints. Other fragments may still rest in church reliquaries, venerated by the faithful unaware of their origins. This physical separation mirrors how history becomes fragmented, pieces preserved here, portions hidden there, the full truth never assembled. The next time you enter an old church and see a relic, perhaps you'll wonder. In that questioning, you honor those nearly lost to history's deliberate forgetting. For in remembering the Whitmore victims, we assert that no institutional reputation is more valuable than the truth, however disturbing. This mystery reveals the darkest aspects of human nature disguised as devotion. What do you think? Was everything revealed, or do dark secrets still hide within church relics? Comment below. If you want more horror stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with a fellow mystery lover.